All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Finance Committee, Thursday, March 6th. This meeting is in person and is being recorded. We also have a few people that are on Zoom, and we will be doing roll call votes in the case that we have to do a vote. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let's just like to start with an opening statement. This year, the theme is actuals. We've been looking at actuals for the last 3 years, and we feel that the actuals show a better story as far as the future projections on what costs are going to be in the future. Budgets do not. Budgets basically are the maximum that any particular department can spend. So I'm going to bring up a chart here in a few minutes, but I also want to know that and make sure there's no misconception. FinCom has always approved the school budget that the school committee passes. We've never not agreed to it. We're not involved with negotiations, and that all negotiations happen between the select board, town administrator, school administration. So we don't say you got to fire teachers or hire teachers. We don't really get involved in that. What our role is we're advisors to the town meeting, and town meeting ultimately decides the budget for everybody. But what we do is we provide insight that you may not get at the school committee vote, because we're independent and we have a different perspective because we're looking at the budget for the whole town. That said, Gary, if you could bring up the file. Okay. So like I said, I don't know if anybody can read that. Is there any way we can get it bigger?
The bottom right of the screen, Gary.
Okay. Can you move it? Okay. Okay. So these are actuals. Can you bring it up a little bit? For the last 3 years. So the first part shows you revenues. These are property taxes, real estate taxes, all kind of motor vehicle, all different types of tax, meal tax. And as you can see, that the taxes that have come in 2022, they brought in $76,343,000. And in 2023, they brought in $78,939. And in fiscal year 2024, the last year, the town brought in $82,689,000. So I have year-over-year increases by all the different areas. But if you look at total taxes have averaged 4.2% per year over that 2-year period. So that's money coming into the town. So that's 4.2. Okay, so could you go up, Gary? Okay, so this is just really other revenue. It's not a tremendous amount of money, but as you can see, you know, that's 8.2%, and that's kind of a, you know, these types of revenue really vary quite a bit, and they're not a lot of money. As you can see, miscellaneous averaged 40.2%, but, you know, licenses and permits, you know, was down a particular year. Who knows why? But So that's other revenue. So now, go up a little bit more. This is state revenue. Oh, no, we're going up too far. This is state, and we like to deal with facts. So the state revenue was 15,485. Then the following year was 15,761, and then the last year was 14,347. Okay. So obviously the big item there is Chapter 70 money. 10,049 one year, 10,251, 10,449. So with all those different revenues, but the key is Chapter 70 money. In those 3 years, the state has given us an average of 2%. Now, what am I saying there? What I'm saying is that the revenue, that the taxes that are coming in from the town are basically at least keeping up with inflation. But at 2%, the state aid is not keeping up with it, even with inflation, even close. So that's right there is what puts pressure on the budget. Okay? Now, as a committee, we went through this in the fall, so I just brought, because if you remember, we went through this before. Okay, so go up. Okay, so again, actuals. Okay, these are all the different departments' expenses. And general government, public safety. We separated Dartmouth schools with New Bedford Volk because we have no control over New Bedford Volk because it's all based on the state, what the state allows us, New Bedford Volk to charge us. So you can see some numbers there. One thing that stands out is the debt service, and I guess when we paid off, and I have a separate one for debt service, so you don't have to go with that. When we paid off the high school, that debt service dropped quite a bit. But as you can see, and I was surprised when I saw this number, that general government went up 9.5%. And I was really surprised at that number. But the Dartmouth schools, year over year, actual expenses went up 4.2% on average. And I think that it's hard to believe that they could keep it at a 4.2. I thought that was a pretty good number for something as large as the schools. But you can see how large the schools are, and that this is why we spend so much time on it, because last year 51 million really out of the 96 million is the schools, and it's even a higher number than that because employee benefits are paid by, in that line, employee benefits. It's not part of the Dartmouth schools. So again, we're looking at actuals now. The select board formed this group that did the capital for going forward for a lot of years, which is going to obviously include a lot of the schools, and they really did a good job doing that. But that's only half the equation. The other half is where are we going to go in the future as far as expenses go. And so again, we're looking at actuals. The theme is actuals because the budget every year is just the maximum that you can spend in each department. So it really doesn't give you an indication of where spending is going in the town, and this does. So I wanted to share that with you and in our committee, just to give you a little bit different perspective. Okay, that said, I'm going to ask Nate Silver to come up. Nate Silver, this is the first time we've ever allowed somebody from the public to speak, but Nate's been talking to me for about 6 months, and I think he offers a little bit different perspective, and we're gonna limit you to 5 to 10 minutes, Nate. But and I've also asked him, because he's spoken at school committee meetings and he's written op-eds in the newspaper. I asked him to give us something new rather than just a repeat of what's there. And I admire your dedication and all the work that you've done and working on this on the school budget. Okay, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nathan Silva. I am a father to 2 daughters. My oldest is 9, my youngest is 3. My youngest has 15 years before she crosses the graduation stage. So I have a long-term perspective that I'm looking at this on and how to maintain quality education in Dartmouth for the long term. Before I really get into what I want to say, I know you guys had a discussion at the last meeting regarding the school choice program. I just want to say a couple words on that. I think it's important when determining the financial viability of the school choice program. I think we can all agree that we should isolate the high school budget, right? We only have school choice children at the high school level, right? So in order to truly see what the financial picture is, we can't take a look at the whole cost per student of every student in the district, right? We can exclude DeMello and DMS, transportation, administration, all those things can be excluded from the equation. So I've done that homework, and I'd sit down with any of you and share the homework I've done if you're interested in seeing it. But when I isolate the high school budget from the rest of the school budget, it comes out to about $10,800 per high school student, right? I think, Bob, at one open public comment period for the school choice program, you would throw the dart against the wall that 50% was the variable cost, right? So if we stipulate that, let's just stipulate that 50% is the variable cost, school choice is essentially a break-even proposition. And when you factor in the benefits of the school choice program, things like kids that participate in theater, kids that participate in athletics, kids that participate in music, or the breadth of AP courses that we're allowed to or were enabled to host because of the population size of the school, it becomes a no-brainer if it's a break-even. But I went even deeper than that, and I did an analysis on the high school budget line items in my amateur analysis, isolate what is the variable cost, right? And what I came up with was somewhere on the magnitude of $2,500 per student of variable cost. And my estimate would have to be off by about 104% before we're back to break even, right? I don't think I'm that bad at estimating variable costs. So I think it's a financially viable program, and it adds quite a bit of benefit. Now, I hear your comments about class size, right? But I think it's important to distinguish between the difference of the impact class sizes have on an elementary student, like my daughter, versus a high school student, right? By the time we get to college, it's not uncommon to sit in a lecture hall with 300 people and one professor, right? But if you put 300 second graders in a room with one teacher, I think we can all intuitively know that that's a recipe for disaster, right? So anyway, I won't say anything more about school choice. I want to get into...
After the last meeting, my colleagues on the finance department have convinced me to give up on school choice.
One way or the other, if anyone wants to see that research I've done, I'm more than happy to sit down with you and share it. But what I really want to talk about is the budget, and I'm not going to get into the details of the school budget. I want to look at the town overall. Similar to what you've done, Bob, I've done some analysis of my own. And I'll start by saying I appreciate the work that you guys do. I've watched all of your videos, as crazy as that might sound to most people. But I have, and I appreciate that you guys get into the detail, and I appreciate that you ask hard questions, right? You're looking out for me as a taxpayer to make sure that the budgets and the money that we spend is spent appropriately, and I appreciate that. But a friend of mine mentioned on my social media, and I'll quote, that our budgets are a reflection of our community's values, and I think that struck me pretty strong. I think it's a great statement. And I think historically, Dartmouth has been known for our educational system, right? It's the reason I moved to town. Bob, I think you mentioned to me that it's the reason you moved to town. Might not be the reason you stayed, but many of us have moved to town because Dartmouth has historically had a great educational system, and it still does. But I'm concerned about the future, given where we're going. So I want to bring up a spreadsheet that I've done. It's very similar to yours, Bob, and there's a lot of numbers behind it. You're the finance committee, so I trust you don't mind looking at a spreadsheet. But what I did was I took from the town meeting warrant, the budgets, and I did the same thing for actuals, because I hear your point on that, Bob. I'm struggling with my Excel. I'm just going to hide all that stuff so we can follow along a little bit easier. Excuse me. No, I'm just going to go. So what I really want you to focus on is this column here. So what I've done is I've taken the budget. This is the percent increase from FY19 to FY25 for all of the different line items in the budget. Now, these items that are highlighted in red, those are those things that we can't change, right? It's Bristol County Agricultural High School, employee benefits, Voc Tech, insurance, FinCom reserve, and debt service, right? Those are things we can't change. We can ignore them. But when we look at the percent increase in the budget from FY19 to FY25, we'll see that the town administration and select board has received a 78% increase over that period of time. Weights and measures, small departments, 76.9, building department, 63%, park commission, 63%. And, we go on, and all the way down here in blue, we see the schools at 23.3% in budget increase, when all of these other departments are getting substantially more. Now, I'm not saying that I want other departments to lose budget, but this just puts it in perspective in terms of what we as a town are saying our priority levels are. And I think that's important to consider. So that's that. I want to talk a little bit about last year's budget and how that affected my family personally, right? And I think you've read it, or you've heard me say it in other public meetings, but the direct result of last year's budgets, where the schools had to lose 9.5 positions, is that my daughter's class size increased by 33% between this year, which is from the 2nd grade to the 3rd grade. Now, there's a tangible difference that I can see when I'm sitting down with my daughter and doing her homework with her, that affected her educational experience this year. Now, I've heard the comments and the request and desire for data, right? What are the effects on outcomes? And I agree, it's important to know that. But the problem with that is that we're looking for outcome data, which means that the harm has already been done, right? The effect on my daughter's outcome is not going to be readily apparent midway through the school year when her class size is increased by 33%. But you compound that over time, and trust me, we'll see it in the data in a decade. But it's too late by then, right? I think intuitively we can know that a more poorly funded school department will ultimately perform less well than a well-funded school department, right? I think that's all I want to say about that. But again, if I'm a betting man, I don't want to put that wager on the table that we're just going to bet with whether or not the funding levels are adequate to not impact the outcomes when we can't. The time's wasted by the time we see that data.
I got to kind of cut you short because
Okay.
I got a very long presentation here. But
I'm almost done. So the last thing I want to really bring up is, and you've heard me say it before, is my concern with the using the school choice savings account essentially to pay for ongoing operating expenses. It's a violation of the town's financial policies for a reason, right? Because when that money runs out, what are we going to do? And currently, there is no plan in place, right? I'm personally fine with spending that type of money in that type of way if there is a plan in place as to what we're going to do at the end of that. But right now, it's not bridging a gap. And I said this in the school committee meeting on Monday, it's a bridge to nowhere, right? There is no plan in place as to what we are going to do, and I think that's a big problem. If the expectation is just for the schools to absorb it, once the funds run out, my opinion is that our kids have already done enough. We've already lost 9.5 positions last year. We already lost even more positions the year before that. Our kids have done enough to bear the burden of the town's financial pressures, and I think it's time for the rest of the community to help hold that load. Now, Bob, you asked for solutions, and there's not great solutions, right? We're in a budget crunch, but again, from my perspective, our kids have already done their part to be a part of the solution. It's time for everyone else. So what are our options? Well, we had a record year of free cash, right? Everyone was excited that we had record free cash. Perhaps we need to sharpen our pencil on our revenue forecast so that we can put more of that money into the operating budget. That would have an effect on our ability to fund capital, though, right? So there's pluses and minuses of that. Do we reallocate resources in town? Well, the next spreadsheet I want to show you, and again, I'll keep it brief, is what would that look like? So this is, let me zoom in a little bit so anyone can see it. So if we took, this is our FY '24 to FY '25, if we zero out FinCom reserve, the things that we can't control, and we sum up everything else, we increased the budget by about $600,000. This number here down below is the amount we spent from the school choice reserve fund last year. So even if we kept every other department at zero from FY '24 to FY '25, zero increase, we'd still be short, and gave all that money to the schools, we'd still be short on what they spent from, or what they had to spend from reserves in addition to the 9.5 cuts, right? So the last option really is it time to start considering an override, right? We don't like that word in this town, and I get it, but the picture is pretty dire, and the more time I spend looking at the details of these numbers, and I've spent quite a bit of time, as I think you can tell, looking at the details of the number, I think we have to have serious conversations as to whether or not that's something this town should consider. Because otherwise, again, like I said, the kids have done enough. We shouldn't be expecting them to do any more than they've already done. It's time for the rest of us in town to carry that load. But that's all I've got to say. Thank you. I appreciate, Bob, you let me come up here and speak, and thank you all.
Introduce yourself.
James Kiley, Assistant Superintendent, Dartmouth Public Schools. Just give me a sec to get this working.
Yeah, just 1 second, Jim.
Yeah, sure.
Brian, can you hear us? Okay,
Yes, I can hear you. No
okay,
problem. Thank you.
thanks.
Why am I not up there? Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I made copies just in case. Most of this information is in the budget information that was emailed, but in case you wanted to.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess first I want to thank you all for having me here and talking about something that matters a lot to me, the Dartmouth Schools budget. So thanks, Bob, for your analysis. I agree. I mean, actual spending's important. I think we'll talk a little bit. I have a slide in here about our actual spending. So I can, we'll get to that in this presentation. I guess, actually, sorry, I went too fast there. So along with the finance, so I guess before I go through the presentation, I just want to say, so what was emailed to you was the Finance Committee form that you folks had requested. What I did was the words in bold on that form are my responses to the different things on there. Some of them are directing you to certain documents, and there's attachments to that. So attachment A is the Dartmouth Public Schools FY26 budget packet. That's also available on our website. It includes the budget summary and the detail, the strategic plan, and other analysis and info. Attachment B is the FY24 actual spending, the FY25 year-to-date spending, and the FY26 proposed spending. We're going to look at that in the presentation. Attachment C is a capital improvement plan. We're also going to hit that in brief because it's a 10-year capital improvement plan. We're going to hit that in brief in the presentation. Attachment D is the org chart. Attachment E is the entry findings that you and I talked about before the meeting, Bob, in terms of the entry finding reports also has a SWOT analysis. We call it a score analysis, but it's the same thing in there for you to review. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that, and please, if there are any questions, we're available to answer them.
Could you thank June, because she sent me a lot more detail on how the whole strategic plan was put together, so I
Yes,
appreciate
I
that.
will.
Thanks.
I will. She's probably watching right now, I'm sure. This strategic plan slide is a summary of the strategic plan that we created, the new strategic plan for the district. It's a 5-year plan, and I think it's worthwhile for me to take a minute here to read our mission and our vision, just so the community has an understanding of what our goals are. Together with students, staff, families, and community, we are committed to cultivating a safe, supportive, and inclusive learning environment that empowers all students to become compassionate, informed, and contributing members of our local and global community. So that's our mission statement, and our vision is meant to be an inspirational statement of who we want to be, and it is, united as one Dartmouth, we are invested in the ongoing improvement of our community. Dartmouth Public Schools proudly offers unparalleled opportunities leading to educational excellence and success for current and future generations. So those are sort of the groundwork that was the beginning of our strategic plan based on our SWOT analysis and entry plan findings, and we created strategic focus areas from there in teaching and learning, safe and supportive schools, family and community engagement, and of course, budget and capital improvements. So there's a lot more to it. It's a big document. There's very clear, it's meant to be actionable. There's very clear action steps in the document. So feel free to, it's on our website. It's in the information that was provided to you. I'd encourage you to take a look at it when you get a chance. So we're going to start off with kids. So our enrollment is right now 3,282 students. Elementary class size is 21 students on average. Middle school class size, 20 students on average. High school class size, I can't give you a straight number because it really varies depending on the offering. We have electives, we have AP courses, we have phys ed classes, we have, so there's such a variety of courses, but I can ultimately give you more information if you're really interested in that, but it's a lot of data. We're at 12.5 students to one teacher. Just for perspective, we'll talk a little about our staffing in another slide in a minute, but the state average is 11.9 students to one teacher. So we're 0.6 students above the state average in that regard. We are projecting fiscal year 26 enrollment to be down approximately 3%, about 100 kids next year. So we have had some enrollment decline in the district and are projecting some for next year, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means in an upcoming slide. But the other story about who our kids are, and I shared this with you last year, and I think it's important because I'm not sure everyone in the community understands that 43% of our kids are high needs. And that means that they have special needs, which you'll see has increased from 12.5% of our student population to 21.2% of our population. It's up 7% this year alone. So, when we talk about things later in this presentation about our recommendations and the way we're realigning resources, we're doing that to meet the needs of these kids. So it's important for the community to understand that. So I was merciful and I took out some slides about this because I know that I took quite a bit of time on this last year, but it's very important. This is a reflection of where we stand. And our total spending is $2,752 below the state average, and we're 270th out of 322. I was hoping the FY24 numbers were going to be out, but the state hasn't released them yet. But I'm pretty sure it's going to reflect a similar trend, if not worse. We're $276 per student below average in teachers. Of the 322 districts, we're 196th. I think, if you look at it, this is one of our closest areas to average, and it's really the place where we devote most of our resources, as we should, to instruction. Excuse me. We're 38%, or $1,264 per student below average in insurance and benefits. So we're 308th of the 322 districts. We're 33%, or $239 per student below average in administration, 296th of the 322 districts. 39%, or $671 per student below average in operations and maintenance, 310th out of 322 districts. That's our lowest area, which I can't believe we do as good a job as we do with our buildings with that kind of spending. We're 9% below average in pupil services spending. Of the 322 districts, we're 148th. So,
Could you describe what pupil services, a little bit more detail?
Okay. So pupil services is transportation, nurses, attendants. It's a whole category of things that are not directly instruction related. Student activities spending, athletic spending, music spending. I know you were talking about music pre-meeting here. Yeah, we're not a high spending district, and we're getting incredible return on our investment in this area.
So would occupational therapists and?
No, those are in instruction.
Or instruction,
Yeah.
okay.
So again, I think we're doing a lot with a little in this case. And obviously, $2,700 more per student just to get to state average would be an entirely different school district and one that obviously would probably be meeting all of our strategic plan goals and even achieving the vision that we have in place.
Yeah, at the end, I want to talk about insurance, but I'll come back to that, okay?
Sure. So this chart compares our staff per 100 students to other districts. Dartmouth's the middle line there, the green line. You'll notice that Dartmouth has less staff per 100 students than the state average in every one of those categories. The DART is our comparable districts. So it has less staff than in all the categories in our comparable districts other than teachers. And it is pretty close to the average there. So, I think, again, we have extremely good return on investment. We're doing well. Our kids are doing well. They could be doing better, but they're doing well. And we're very lean here. And that's obviously reflected in both those per pupil expenses and the staffing levels that we have. Oh. Okay, so what are we proposing in the FY26 budget? So since since you asked Mr. Garvin about those, I'll talk a little bit about each of the areas. Instruction includes salaries of teachers, principals, counselors, mental health supports, our education support professionals, the former teacher assistant name, the substitutes, other classroom staff, instructional technology, professional development, special ed services, instructional materials, textbooks, although most of those are not actual books now, but they're materials, education materials. So that's 75% of our budget is made up of those items. Other services, which we talked about, again, transportation, athletics, music, nurses, student activities, and a few other smaller areas, that makes up 13% of our budget. Maintenance and utilities, pretty self-explanatory what that is, that's 6% of our budget. Out-of-district tuitions, so those are students who we're unable to serve in district relating to their educational needs. So that makes up 4% of our budget. And then administration makes up 2% of our budget. So the next slide, we'll talk more about it, but that's a total of $55,353,511. Just before I go on, I think it's important to note that in this plan, we're utilizing $973,220 from the school choice reserves. So we're actually spending almost $1.7 million, but we get $700,000 in. So the savings that we're using is $973,000 in this plan. And you'll see that again on this slide. The next slide is about specific recommendations, so I won't dwell on that part of it here, but you'll see the change in those particular categories from fiscal year 25 to the fiscal year 26 proposed budget. The overall increase that we're proposing is a 4.1% budget increase, so less than average.
Yeah.
Right? 4.2, average? Less than average.
Say, don't you?
Yeah. I was happy to see that. So what are we proposing? So, I mean, you'll notice a trend. These are things that are not nice to haves. These are like must-haves to meet student needs. An adjustment counselor, half-time at the elementary level, special ed teachers at the high school, 2 school psychologist, so this is actually increasing an existing staff member's position from 3 days a week to full-time. Special ed team facilitators, 2. High-quality instructional materials to support our strategic plan. So we'll be spending money, our plan is to incorporate into our budget what we can for high-quality instructional materials supporting our strategic plan. But we're also supplementing that with school choice funds, because $150,000 sounds like a lot of money. Doesn't go that far when you're talking about implementing high-quality curriculum. Human resources director position, an education support professional at the Cushman School, then some smaller stipendary positions, music advisors, which we currently have and we juggle, and the parent group pays for partially, and it's a messy situation. Website and social media liaison, and art, music, health, wellness coordination stipends.
So these are ads?
These are ads. These are ads. I mean, these are recommendations too, this next slide, but not happy ones. Unfortunately, what we are, where we are with our budget is, in order to make any progress and meet student needs, we have to realign resources. So what we're proposing in this budget is a reduction of 9 positions. These are the 9 that we're proposing. We're doing everything we can to make sure that those reductions are by attrition. So if somebody is retiring or resigns or something of that nature, We try and consider that. So it's not, at this point, we're not entirely through it by attrition, though, on this list of reductions. The net of that, Bob, because I know you were just calculating it, is 2.1 positions. So we'll be down 2.1 positions in this current plan.
Okay, thank you.
So the things, I think it's important to just remember and acknowledge the things that we are spending through the school choice reserves. So we still have former ESSER positions. So this will be the second year, fiscal year '26. We're currently funding in fiscal year '25 these positions. And as I said, we are trying to accomplish the action steps and goals of the strategic plan, and in order to do that, we need to incorporate school choice funds for that. So those are things that are in school choice. There's a detailed slide coming up here that shows what it looks like over the next 4 years, well, this year, current fiscal year, the proposed fiscal year '26 plan, and then the 2 years after that. So you'll note that in this current fiscal year, we're using $1.3 million of school choice funds. Next year's plan would be 1.6. The reason that is because our after-school programs for this summer, our summer school and everything, were able to be funded through the final ESSER monies. So, but the ESSER monies expired in September 30th. So there are no more ESSER monies. We spent it in its entirety. So we'll be incorporating that into school choice. You'll see that on the summer and after-school programs line.
Okay. So, just to make sure I understand and anybody in the audience understands, ESSER money was money that came to us because of COVID.
Yes. So when COVID occurred, there were 3 actions by the federal government to directly support public schools. And they called them ESSER. I can't even remember what it stands for anymore. I'm glad. I thought I would never forget. But the first one was a very small amount for us. It was not much, but it was really intended to just try and make sure that districts had money to be able to meet the technology needs of kids who weren't going to be in school and remote learning and everything. So, but then it expanded, and they realized that over 2 more cycles that there were direct needs that districts just weren't going to be able to provide to these kids. So the town of Dartmouth Public Schools received about $5 million in ESSER funding since 2020. And it was finally finished up in the fall. So, again, I think, you guys are the finance committee, we can't continue at this level, funding this way. So it is kind of a bridge to nowhere. I'll take a cue from Nate. I don't have a way to solve that out in FY28. So. I know that I appreciate.
Can I just-
Yeah. Of course.
So the revenue, the 700,000 is school choice revenue, right?
Yep.
So you're going to be, when you get money in for the students that attend this year,
Yep.
you're going to be applying it to this. So you're going to be matching income and expense.
Yeah, so you'll see, for instance, what I had on this slide, it's on this slide and the slide before, that is the net of the two. So the bottom line on this slide, 973,000, is the savings that's being used. So not the, there's an additional 700,000 that's
That's the
being
funds.
used.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll use the 700 and then, dip into the savings. I appreciate the look at actuals. I think from our perspective, we're pretty thin. So I don't think, I'm not saying that other departments aren't. I appreciate and work closely with a lot of departments in the town. So, but we are very thin. And as a result, if you look at our actual in '24, we had $15,000 remaining from budget to actual. $15,537.25, of which $14,668.86 was used to cover the Medicaid deficit, and which left us with $868.39 left. If I didn't add, there was a lot of columns, so I didn't add fiscal year '23. I'd be happy to provide more info for you. Fiscal year '23, we ended with $3.01. That was after $24,000 and change had been used to cover the Medicaid deficit. We do have a problem with that Medicaid line. It's only a $40,000 line. So in the big picture of the budget, it's not really a major issue. I mean, I think that's why we haven't fixed it, because it's so minor in the grand scheme of things. But you'll see in fiscal year '25, we've already spent $40,000 on '44. It's going to be another $15,000 in the hole for this year for that. But I'm sure we'll figure out a way to cover $15,000, so.
But I just want to point out, and this is more for the audience and people on TV who are watching, at the end of the year, when you have extra cash, you prepay expenses in the thing.
Yep,
Which
every year.
I don't disagree with. I don't disagree with. But that's one of the reasons you can come so close. 'Cause,
Yeah, but the real benefit of so what, by law, we're very limited in terms of prepaying expenses. What we can prepay by law is special education tuition. And or services provided by a collaborative. So for whatever reason, that some legislator had a relative working for a collaborative and it got into the law that you could do that. I don't really know. But that's the law. And so we don't prepay services to the collaboratives, but we do prepay tuition. And the reason we do that is if we prepay the same amount every year, special ed tuition is the most volatile and expensive area of our budget. You could easily have a student cost $300,000 that you didn't know about when you budgeted. So if if a student moves to town, you've got to provide the service, could be $300,000. By prepaying, you prevent me having to spend $300,000 of the FinCom reserve fund for special education tuition. What would have to happen is that would end up being $300,000 that I'm not able to prepay for the next year, and then I would have to increase the budget. So it would all come, we'd have to address it eventually. But it would be a tool to get us through a very challenging budget situation in any particular year. And that's the reason we do it. So that's, those are our actuals.
May I ask a question?
Janine?
Yeah.
It's a two-part question, actually, about the Human Resources Director
Oh, yeah,
that's in your
okay.
budget. So, first of all, would it be a consideration that that role is at the town level and that person handles both? Okay, that's part one. Part two is, since you obviously are running a tight budget, why would you consider that versus a support professional for the lower grades where there is a concern about the pupil-teacher ratio?
Yeah, we did add a education support professional at the elementary level in this budget, but it's a good point. I think that we have a lot of exposure in that. So our HR team is myself, the superintendent, and the superintendent's assistant. That's our HR team. None of us are HR professionals. I've been doing it for a long time, so I guess, that's as good as it gets for us at the moment. But I think that there is value in terms of protecting the interests of the town and the district with having a professional HR department. But it's a proposal, and it's one that we believe we need. But we have a lot of needs, you're right. You're right. In terms of the town, so the town very recently had a HR person. It's vacant right now. That person didn't work with us. I'm open to talking about it, though. I don't know what the details of that person's job are, but certainly we'd talk about it.
And versus putting in an extra support professional?
Well, like I said, we did add a support professional at the elementary level. I would love to have more. I think, to be honest, the education support professionals, when you look at this slide, what you're looking at is, they call it paraprofessionals in the state analysis, so that's why it's included there. We're almost 1 per 100 student less. We are 1 per 100 student less than the state average and less than our DART. I think that the 270th out of 322 district spending reflects that we are thin at certain areas. Yes, that is a need too. We have a lot of needs. There's a lot of things that didn't make it into this budget.
Yeah, at the last school committee meeting, the HR person wasn't in it, was it?
It was.
It was? Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been in since the start here.
Okay, and how many employees do you have?
We have 596 regular employees, like not substitutes, but.
Okay. I mean, I watched a school committee meeting, and I will say that some of the school committee members made a pretty good, it was a good discussion about why you need this position. With the number of people you have, you really need a human resource director, I would, especially since somebody hiring people has really got to know education. It's not, you're not just hiring a clerk or something, so, but, okay.
So our capital plan requests. We have a few. So this is our first year that we created a 10-year capital plan. So fiscal year 26 through 35. It was a good exercise for us. We had normally created a 5-year plan. And, a few things came out in that, within 10 years, yeah, we've got to replace some things that we didn't even think that were that old. I mean, I've been here 14 years, so I've done some things that are going to actually have to be replaced, in this plan. But I'll focus on, the current requests, the current year requests. We met with the Capital Improvement Planning Committee yesterday on these, by the way, just so keep you informed of where we are. So technology hardware replacement, we have Chromebooks in daily operation still that were purchased in 2017. We have 1,879 Chromebooks that are 5 years old or older. So if you think about that, that's a lot of devices. In terms of technology hardware replacement, our students, we have a 1-to-1, ratio. We also have devices for specific things, like you might have some classes that need a more robust computer than a Chromebook especially at the high school level. So we have devices there that would also be part of that. It's critical for us that we keep up with the replacement cycle. Obviously, if we still have 2017s in the rotation, we need to get to those. Fire alarm detection system replacement at DeMello and Potter. This probably might sound familiar. Last year, there was a $50,000 design article approved. We, let's see now, 2 days ago, got the draft design from the engineer for that. The engineer is GGD, who is located in Dartmouth. We had a competitive selection. We ended up using them. They're working closely with the fire chiefs on this. We originally had thought it was going to be approximately $550,000 based on the engineer's estimate. We're now moving that down to $450,000. They found some middle ground with the fire chiefs, but the fire chiefs are very serious about completing this. So our technology is antiquated and original to the buildings, and we have very little detection in the buildings. Security upgrades. So Chief Levesque arranged for the Department of Homeland Securities to come down and conduct security assessments at our schools. They were actually down again this week. They've been down a couple of times. And the last time we did this was about a dozen years ago. We had Derek Kenny, former police officer, was trained in these assessments, former Dartmouth police officer. We did that, and we did all the security vestibules at the schools at that time. As a result, which have been certainly a much-needed improvement. We had entryways where you would enter a building and the office wasn't even near there. So, obviously control of in and out of buildings, pretty important these days especially. So they have made specific recommendations, especially in relation to access to the buildings and access to the classrooms, doors, hardware, glass, things like that. Pretty practical recommendations. So our hope is that we can incorporate those recommendations. High school track reconstruction. This was on the list, well, I think it's been 3 years or so on the list. The track was designed to last about 20 years. It's 24 years. We keep cutting sections out of it and patching those. Now we're starting to see where the patches are failing around the patches. So, it's not a viable long-term solution. And new track would probably last about 20 years. It's time. High school roof replacement. The good news, I guess, is we can hold off on this until we hear from MSBA. So the select board on, the 24th, I think.
24th, yeah.
24th voted to submit the statement of interest. The school committee had already done that on February 10th. We are submitting that to MSBA, and then we'll see what they, whether they invite us into the program or not. I hope they do. It's certainly needed. It's a big job, but at this point, we'll hold off from any funding until we hear back from them. I think it's such a big job that they'll likely say, okay, you've got to do some design work before. So it'll be probably multiple town meetings in order to get a job of that magnitude done. So it might be a while before it gets done, which is a little unnerving, but I know that the finance committee was kind enough to give us some money for temporary repairs last year, which we did, but they're pretty temporary, and there's a lot of problems on that roof.
So what material are you talking about using for the roof?
Oh, I would love to do PVC like we've done on all the other buildings. So my first building, let's see, the first roof I did here was in Quinn 14 years ago. That's a PVC roof. It's held up fantastic. All of the other buildings are PVC. It's they melt the seams together on PVC, so it's literally becomes one piece. What's up on the high school right now is black. It's a rubber, and expands and contracts and it's glued together. So, obviously, you think, okay, that's not going to be a great long-term solution. It was good. I mean, it's lasted us a while, and 24 years, which is more than you should get from a roof like that. So, but I would prefer if we do like a 30-plus year roof. The PVC, they say the life expectancy is 30, but there are PVC roofs that are 40 years old in Massachusetts. That's about the longest that technology has been around, and they're like still fine. So it's a long-term solution. Hopefully we do that, but it is more expensive. That's the downside. But I mean, if you could get double the time out of it, or whatever, at least 50% more of the time, it would be worth the money. Flooring replacement, so these have been, you've seen a bunch of these through the years. For 14 years, I've been gradually trying to replace asbestos floors at the schools. We completed the DeMello School, almost like 98% done at the Potter School. We've got a couple of closets to do, but the Quinn School is only about 40% done. And we had a situation 2 years ago where tiles began popping up, and it's a serious issue that you have to address when that happens. So we last summer targeted the worst rooms at the Quinn School and did those. So hoping to continue to do that and try and get this done. This will not finish it, though. You can only do maybe 10 to 12 rooms in a summer maximum because of the time it takes and the clearance you need before the start of school. There's a pretty tight window of, maybe 10 weeks of the summer. So it's also on the capital plan in out years until we finish. HVAC repairs and replacement. Really, this is just to keep our existing infrastructure operational, but what we do with this work, we work with Kathy Stanley, who's the town's energy manager. If you haven't had her in to talk to you guys, you should. She's incredible and done a lot of good work for this town. She makes sure we get every utility incentive, every design, like free design money from the utilities and their engineers, and any grant funds. She's excellent. The one thing I just wanted to highlight, like the Quinn School, which Quinn School is our fourth school on the list to be replaced. It was built in 1967, and it has a lot of merit. The building is pretty nice in some ways, but it is from 1967. Again, 3 other buildings will be done before that school gets replaced someday. The thing with the Quinn School in terms of HVAC, it has pneumatic controls. Pneumatics are little tubes of air that connect the classroom thermostats to the heat source. And those little tubes of air, that air runs through the system and tells the heat source how much heat to send to the classrooms and the equipment in the classrooms how to run. It's not, like, nobody fixes it anymore. It's an entirely antique way of doing things, and it's not effective. So things like that are the things that we need to address if we want to maintain that building in use for, hopefully another 20, maybe more years. So those are what we're hoping to accomplish. Playgrounds, we have some existing old playgrounds. We actually have some money right now that we're working with to try and update a playground at the Quinn School. So we're working on that, but we have other deficiencies that we hope to address. School bus replacement, we have one school bus that we own and one driver, and we use it every day. We use it for the things you would think we use it for, like extracurricular activities, sports, music, stuff like that. We also use it we have an early childhood program at the high school in which students from the high school go to our elementary schools every day and learn about caring for kids in the educational setting. So It's a great program, super successful, and it actually leads kids to a pipeline that a lot of kids pursue. So that, without this bus, that's going to be a whole different thing. It's a 2017. Tremblay's bus maintains it for us. We send it to their yard and their mechanic. They indicated that they wouldn't be driving it at this point. Now, their operation's a little different than ours, obviously, but they wouldn't be using it. We have concerns about passing inspection. So far, we're good for this year. And so at some point, we've got to address it. What the real important thing to note is it pays for itself in about 2.5 years. So if we were able to find a vendor to do this work, which that's a big if these days because there's this incredible shortage on bus drivers and buses. So even if we could find a bus company to do this, in 2.5 years, this bus would pay for itself. This is a 2017, it's been paid for 5.5 years. So it was a good investment in 2017. So hopefully we can do something with that. It does take a long time to get. That's the other thing. It's not gonna, there's probably not one sitting there that we're gonna buy. It's probably gonna be months, to get. And the other thing on the list has been on the list for, let's see, we finished the stadium turf in 2019 with plans to do the rest. Now it's been 3 years since we bid out the job. We bid out the whole job. It came in at 6.2 million. We had $1 million and said, okay, we can't do the job. At some point, I think the community needs to figure out how they want to address that. We looked at reducing scope. We looked at any options where we could do little phases. It's not really a piecemeal job. It needs to be, you need to address those concrete stands for the long term. And it's going to cost some money to do that. Unfortunately, I think as things go, the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. I mean, construction escalation is not good. So it's more than, it's going to cost us more to wait, but I understand there's only so much money, so. And that's kind of my notes. Actually, I did have a couple of specific things that I wanted to mention because a couple of members had specific questions. So it's not in the presentation, but member had asked about enrollment decline and how we're reacting to that. I think the answer is we're adjusting accordingly. We had in FY25 we have cuts of staff relating to enrollment decline. In FY26 we have proposed cuts of staff. In FY24 we had cuts of staff. FY24, 25, and proposed in 26 we've cut a bus route, 1. Now, the numbers, I'll tell you a little bit about, you had a member who isn't here this evening ask about transportation ridership. And so we did multiple counts of riders, actual counts of riders to make sure that we got the right numbers because, kids can be out on a given day. So we did multiple day counts. We have 1,190 riders on 29 elementary routes. The average is 41 students a route. Elementary routes, the lowest number we have on any route is 20, and the highest is 65. We have routes that are up till just under an hour. That's when it gets, we try and figure out how to keep a route under an hour. It's a long time for a kid to be on the bus. At the high school and middle school routes, we have 1,029 riders on the 29 routes. Now, again, we're going to go to 28 routes next year, hopefully, if I can figure out how. And then, so that's an average of 35 students. High school, middle school routes range from the lowest of 9 students to 51 students. And I'm sure you'd ask, why do we have a whole bus for 9 students? And it's because where they live is a long, long way to the high school. Fortunately, the high school is not in the middle of town. So, it's unfortunately, that's the reality of being the third largest community in Massachusetts, land area-wise. Again, the longest route for the high school is just under an hour in length, so those kids are getting on the bus at 6:30 in the morning. I mean, it's a long day. I also updated the transportation cost comparison. It's in the budget packet, so you'll see that there.
I was very impressed with that.
It's interesting, at least it's kind of validating to me, being responsible for that program, that we're 17th of the largest, so that analysis is the 20 largest school districts in Massachusetts, land area-wise, the 20 largest towns, land area-wise, in their school districts. And what it says is that we're 17th, in terms of spending, we're 17th out of the 20 per pupil spending. That's a good thing, I think. I think, we're at the bottom, we're third largest community, and we're 17th out of 20 in terms of actual spending. We're $22 above the state average in spending on that. So, considering we're the third largest community in Massachusetts, being $22 per student above state average, I don't think is a bad place. Not to say that transportation isn't expensive. It's expensive.
Yeah.
It's getting more expensive statewide. It's the bus driver shortage, the lack of vehicles for the vendors. It is a problem everywhere. Anyway, I just thought I'd
I
offer
thought,
that information because Mr. Bowles asked that.
yeah, well, I thought for sure that with the size of Dartmouth, that we would be,
At the
at the
top in
top.
spending.
And so when I saw that, I was, wow.
Yeah, we're close to average, which is great.
You did a good job.
No, thanks, I appreciate that. We try. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
I'll open up the floor. I have questions, but I'll open up the floor to anybody who wants to ask any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I know this is not a popular question, but have you discussed recently about charging for transportation?
We haven't, no.
Because I looked at, and I like the chart that you put together, and yes, it is impressive. But, there are towns on there that do charge for their transportation, including Westport, actually, which is very local. So I'm just wondering if it's something you ever discussed.
Yeah, I mean, ever discussed? Yes.
Well,
But recently, no. It is a possible funding source. So this was before my time, but I believe when the override, in conjunction with the override effort failing in 2008, maybe? I think that's when it was in this town. They instituted transportation fees, and my understanding is that the select board, after 1 year of doing it, said, okay, we're going to stop doing that. It was, I guess, a nightmare from a public perspective, and they found the money and they stopped doing it. But I know it exists because we have a revolving account with no money in it that's sitting there from when they did that back, it's going on, I don't know, more than 15 years ago. But they did do it then, but we have not considered that in this budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about new schools.
Yeah.
And this is my opinion, not the opinion of the group. We should always be paying for a school.
I agree.
We should always be paying for a school. To use an analogy, when you're a young family, you have a mortgage, most people have 2 cars. I know, me personally, I used to buy a car, and then 5 years, so every 5 years. So I was always making a car payment because I didn't want to get into a situation where I was paying for 2 cars at the same time. And in the future, based on the ages of the schools, you're going to be paying for a couple of schools in the future. I'll probably be dead, but, it's in the future. But I just, as a policy, I think you should always be paying for the school. Like you said, the cost of, that next school is going to be much, much more expensive than it would have been 5 years ago.
I agree.
When we paid off the high school. I mean, just look at the price of steel. Burgo, wants to build a building, and that went up. And the other thing, and this was presented last week, the price of asphalt for roads has gone up 60% this year. So, that's just my perspective. School choice, I'd say, I'm going to shut up about, but, we've been getting $5,000 a student since 1993. And I had breakfast with Representative Markey, and I complained about that. I said, because I'm fine with school choice at $10,000, but at $5,000, Massachusetts legislature has to change that rate. They should adjust it for inflation.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of where my major objection is, but.
Couldn't agree
as far-
more.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous that has not been changed since that act in '93.
Yeah. So we're going to be meeting with the select board, but does anybody else have any questions? Because I'd like to just point out a couple of things. Go ahead.
I do want to say
Go
something.
ahead. Go ahead.
First, I just want to say thank you for a wonderful presentation and for doing a wonderful job with the budget every year. I know that you put a lot of time and effort into it, and I really appreciate that. The second thing I want to say, and it's not necessarily a question, it's more of a statement, it's not an option to get off of the school choice. Like, whether or not we do school choice is really up to the school committee. That has nothing to do with us as a finance committee. But for the schools to be using the school choice money to maintain people's salaries it's not acceptable. It's completely unacceptable, and we need to figure it out this year, like now, not next year, not the year after. I don't think that it's fair for people's salaries to be on the line of whether or not an override is going to be approved. That's not fair. So I think that it needs to be solved sooner rather than later. And if that means that you have to add more into the budget and you slowly wean them off, well, maybe that's what we do. Maybe 4.1, I hate to be the one to say this, but maybe 4.1 is too low this year. Maybe because we don't want to see 6 or 7% in 3 years, because that's really not going to fly with anybody. So I think that I love the budget. I think it's great, but I think that we need to come off school choice, and we need to figure it out now, not later. So that's my piece that I wanted to say.
Okay.
I mean, it was a comment, not a question, but I mean, obviously, I'm incredibly concerned about what happens, right? The positions that we created with and funded through the ESSER grants were directly tied to the increase in student need that we saw. Those positions probably can't go away. So, I mean, I don't know what does go away if there isn't money for it, but
Right.
it's probably not those positions, it's something else, but we're 270th to 322. I don't have wiggle room. I don't have $1 million of wiggle room that I can say, okay, well, we'll just cut this. It's not happening, so.
Yeah. Thank you for using wiggle room.
Yeah, I know, I got that from you.
Yeah, well, that was $99,000. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in facts, and when we meet with the select board, it's a fact that the state is not supporting these schools. I mean, you just look at the numbers. There's no question. Whether we can do anything about it, again, I met with Representative Markey and said, really, the calculation for Chapter 70 money does not work for Dartmouth. And I was told basically override, that they're not going to do it. And the Chapter 70 money is really oriented to give the big cities money versus the town. So, when you look at my analysis, the money that's coming from the city, from the taxpayers, is not great, but it's at least in the ballgame. But the state, what's causing all the stress is the state aid. The second thing is and I said I want to get back to this. Again, I deal with facts. I don't. In the insurance, if the insurance was more competitive with other towns, when you look at the cost per student, we would go way up in the
would.
ranking of the thing. So, but that's a town issue.
It is.
Because it's the same throughout the town. So, because when we looked at the teachers' salaries, they're in the ballpark. They're in the ballpark. You could drive to Easton and make a little bit more money, but you also have to drive up and down Route 24 every day. So I'm trying to think what else I had to say.
I could speak to your advocacy for Chapter 70 briefly. So we feel the same way, obviously, that this isn't equitable, because we have needy kids that are just as needy as the communities that are getting a significant amount of increased funding from the state through the Student Opportunity Act and the Chapter 70 funds. We don't get any of that money. I'm involved in a group, it's called Project 211. It's there are now 211 districts in the state that are in what the Department of Ed calls hold harmless status, which I don't know how they can call it hold harmless, but anyway, they basically are giving those 211 districts the state minimum in terms of Chapter 70 funding each year. So the other districts are getting something above that, but there's 211 now that are just like us, getting no increase, essentially, 1-2% increase in Chapter 70, which is the minimum that the state is coming up with. And so it's an increasing, it was 113 districts a couple of years ago that were in that group. Now it's 211. It's more than half. It's almost 2/3 of districts. And you're right, I don't begrudge our neighbors in New Bedford or Fall River. They have a lot of needs. We have needs too. And, the funding mechanism essentially ignores our needs. And those 211 districts have come together with state representatives and legislators to attempt to address this. Now, will it fall on deaf ears? I don't know. It might. But there is an organized effort to try and bring it to light at least, and at least get a study in place to prove that, okay, yeah, this is a significant problem for these communities. And you're right. I mean, so the other side of the answer is, okay, an override, because the tax rate is low in town. And there is, in comparison, if you do the analysis, a perceived ability to pay more. So, and that's why the state hasn't come up with money. But we're one of 211 in that situation now, so we're not alone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the presentation. I'd like to thank you for that capital, that 10-year thing. I don't want to take credit, but we're the ones who pushed for the 10-year
Oh,
plan.
yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. It's good.
Because we thought, in the future, that's really what we needed, because we were seeing capital requests that, on the 5-year thing, that all of a sudden this thing came out of nowhere. And so we asked for the 10-year thing, so we're glad that, I know Terry Ham was involved with helping put that together, so I really appreciate it. And thank June for the additional information that
I
she
will.
supplied me on the strategic plan.
Do that. Yeah, she sends her regards. She was sorry she couldn't be here tonight, but.
Okay, any questions on the school? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all for your consideration. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda. Okay. Next on the agenda is a town charter booklet mailing reserve fund transfer.
Budget
Mr. Chairman,
hearing
next on the
schedule.
agenda is the
Budget hearing schedule.
schedule for, thanks, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry, what? Well, no, it's 313.
No, but he goes over it.
No, 313.
So,
Never mind.
Go ahead.
yeah, so on March 13th, Mr. Chairman, I'm presenting the FY '26 draft Schedule A. So you have that. And also, I thought we'd also add some of the topics of discussion that we've been, that Brian has been putting together. So I'd like to include that as part of the agenda.
Who's Brian?
Excuse me. Brian.
Brian on the screen.
Oh, okay,
Brian.
okay. Sorry about that, Brian. I thought it was an employee, I'm sorry.
But we don't have that draft yet, correct?
No, that's
Draft,
Schedule A.
no, it's done. I'm going to forward it to the committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
313.
Yeah. So, and then that'll be on 313. I thought we'd add some of that to it, add the topics of discussion also. And then we are working on the list of warrant articles, Chris and I, so we should have those together, hopefully towards the end of March. You know, some preliminary items that we have to also put in front of the select board. And then next on the agenda is the reserve fund transfer request from the select board's office. This is for the booklet that needs to go out. There's not enough funds in the department to do that, mainly postage, so we're requesting $25,000, and the description is there for the charter changes that were acted on FY '25 budget, and had already been approved due to the number of changes proposed in the omnibus charter amendment.
Yep.
The booklet is expected to be 9 pages. The town is required to send out the mailers per Mass General Law, Chapter 43B, Section 11. So it's for $25,000. The current balance in the reserve fund is $510,000. There's been nothing spent year-to-date.
Okay, so is this the printing of the book?
Printing, yes.
Printing and mailing?
Mailing.
And it has to go to
All residents.
all residents, not just voters, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So you need a
Questions?
I make a motion to
Okay,
approve the request for transfer from the reserve fund for $25,000 to the select board fund.
so Janine made a motion. Second. Second by, Patrick? Okay. Okay, on the motion, I have to do a roll call vote
Oh, yes.
on this. So on the motion, Brian? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Hard to hear.
Yeah, I heard him. Bob Gorvin, yes.
Janine, yes.
Phil? Yes.
Patrick,
Patrick,
yes.
yes.
Carrie, yes?
Okay, Carrie, yes, okay. So.
So, Mr. Chairman, just sign that one, and then I'll fill out the rest.
Okay, so, it's 6? 25, the sum is 25,000. Committee voted in favor, what's it, 5, 6. 6. Okay. Okay. Back to you. Okay, thanks. Okay, any liaison reports? Any liaison reports? No? Okay. Okay, minutes. I heard from Elizabeth on the minutes, and what she's asked that, Gary, you send out the minutes usually on Tuesday, right? Well, she sends them to you and I,
Yeah.
and then we say, okay, and then on Tuesday, you usually send them out to the group, right?
Yeah, usually she'll send them to
Yeah.
me on a Monday or Tuesday, circulate them to the group.
So Elizabeth's asked me that if somebody sees something in the minutes that they want corrected, to let her know before the meeting so that we don't have to
Make amendments at the meeting.
make amendments.
Okay, yeah.
So we would ask that. So,
So you
no,
have.
you didn't pass out the meetings, but I got them in the email.
You've got him in the email for the
Email.
27th.
So,
Yeah,
so that was, what was the date on that?
I make a motion to approve the February 27th Finance Committee
Yes.
minutes.
Okay, so what, motion made by Janine, seconded by Phil.
I
Any
have to
discussion?
abstain. I have to abstain.
Okay, well, we haven't voted yet.
We haven't voted yet.
Okay. Okay, so roll call. Brian, how do you vote on the minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Bob Gorman, yes?
Janine, yes.
Ellie, yes.
Patrick, yes.
Carrie abstains.
Gary abstained, okay.
Carrie Ham, yes.
Oh, there she is.
Where you been?
Just popped right in.
Did you miss my concession on the school choice?
I don't know if that was a concession, because you still brought it up.
Very good presentation, Bob.
All right. You look like you got a red nose.
Oh, poor thing.
Yeah. All right, sorry you're sick,
Me too.
but, good. All right. Anything else we want to discuss?
nothing further for me.
Okay, so next week's the big one, right? Schedule
Next week,
I.
you'll have a schedule, yeah, you'll have it.
Okay. All right, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Harry made a motion to adjourn,
Second.
second by Phil. Okay, roll call. Brian,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Bob, yes.
Janine, yes.
Ellie, yes.
Patrick, yes.
Carrie, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.